The average human in the modern context is largely cut off from deep and transformative encounters with the natural world. There isn't a manifold. Some people live in places where access is non-existent or limited. Others have access, but no time, buffeted as they are by obligations and efforts to earn a living and take care of their families. Even when access and time are present, awareness and inclination might be lacking. Many people live within walking distance of great rivers, lakes, seas, oceans, deserts, plains, mountains, hills, forests, and yet these landforms have faded to the background scenery of their lives. It might be hard for many of us then to imagine what it would be like to adopt a lifestyle whose maintenance, talk less of success, requires keen attention to and relationship with a landform. And yet this is the lifestyle traditionally chosen by the Tuareg and other northern African desert dwellers like the Sahrawis of Western Sahara. These people don't only live in the Sahara Desert, they actively claim it as theirs. But what does it mean to claim a landform as one's own? And what could this mean for us present-day Africans? In this episode of the Mythological Africans podcast, the final of 2025, and in our series focused on the folklore of landforms from the African continent, we probe at these questions with insight drawn from Tuareg Libyan author Ibrahim Al-Koni's The Bleeding of the Stone, which we've been reading this month, and reflections on the poetry and experiences of the Sahrawi people of Western Sahara. Hello friends, and welcome to the Mythological Africans podcast, where we read and talk about stories from African mythology and folklore. I am your host, Helen Tunde. Ibrahim Al-Koni's The Bleeding of the Stone is a tragic book. It's tragic not only in the sense of the calamities that befall its protagonist, Asuf, but also in the way it expresses what happens when the social contracts that bind the people of a given community to each other and to their physical environment are weakened or worse, broken. From all indications, the book is set in the mid-1930s, since the events reference the Italian attempts to conquer Ethiopia. The events unfold as the colonial enterprise, flanked by the demands of the Industrial Revolution for both raw material and easy markets, sank its fingers deeper into the African continent. And at this point, the thumb of conquest had joined the other fingers: exploration, trade, cultural exchange, and evangelization. For better or worse, many centuries-old African cultural practices buckled or simply crumbled under the press of these fingers. For the Tuareg and other desert-dwelling peoples, these were harsh times. Survival was a battle fought on multiple fronts. They had to continue paying close attention to the vagaries of the desert. They had to monitor the wiles of European explorers, traders, scholars, officials, and soldiers who arrived in droves seeking glory or fortune. These were, after all, the times after the active partitioning of the African continent, when the European participants of that exercise were moving to consolidate what they believed was their stake. The people also had to observe and, when necessary, adapt to the changes in their own communities. There were those among them who saw in the Europeans a path to elevation and wealth. There were those who saw a path to freedom from the rigidities of that society. Many Tuareg communities traditionally employed a fairly rigid caste system, with darker-skinned people predictably at the bottom of the food chain. The sun blazed on, scorchingly indifferent. In those times, an allegiance to the desert and its demands made it possible for many to ride the winds of change sweeping the desert. They knew where to hide when trouble came. They knew the secrets of the old language, whose script, scratched into rocks, could offer life-saving information like where to find the closest well or oasis. They knew which valleys turned green first after the rains and so could pasture their camels and goats, and hunt gazelle as needed. They knew which side of the mountain was best to build their tents when the winds and sandstorms came. They knew the lessons in the stories told around night fires under star-laden skies. They knew the secrets of the desert silence, and in their tight-knit communities, they knew who could be trusted with delicate information or how to dissemble when outsiders got too inquisitive. This allegiance to the desert also supported a sense of belonging and identity. The Tuareg bind themselves in confederations and clans which almost always derive from the desert mountains, valleys, and oases where ancestors settled and the animals with whom they thrived and survived. This knowledge, these bonds, were not always enough. In the book, as happened in real life, sometimes the threat of martial brutality loomed larger than the people could bear. Other times, the promise of quick profit, abetted by new technology, or status, denied by community, proved too tempting. One of the most poignant passages in the book recounts how the greediness of a character called Cain tore through the once bountiful herds of gazelle that roamed the desert plains, driving them high into the mountains and triggering cascades of consequences for humans, animals, and plants, as tends to happen when humans ignorantly dam the flow of the river of life. Alconi in the book speaks of how the now rocky and barren plateaus once teemed with life. All this changed with the arrival of Europeans seeking oil and minerals. They brought rapid-firing guns, which some Tuareg hunters like Cain adopted. Gazelle populations declined sharply afterwards because with a single round, Cain would bring down several beasts. He'd press the trigger once and gazelles would drop like clusters of dates torn apart in a storm. The carnage didn't spare the young or the old. The animals which escaped the bullets fled further south and west to the mountains. To other hunters, this migration was a portent of end times, and in many ways it was. The situation culminates in full-scale tragedy when Cain, whose life was saved when he was a baby by the deliberate and selfless sacrifice of a female gazelle, ends up breaking the sacred covenant established between his lineage and that gazelle's by killing the female gazelle's own daughter and her fawn. Cain later commits a murder so foul it basically ruined my enjoyment of the entire book. And it's a theme you see repeatedly in Alconi's books. The lines between reality and mystery and the supernatural just blur, and that is the way of the people. A lot has changed for the Tuareg since the 1930s. Desert-derived confederations and clan remain the source of identity, but more and more, especially given anti-nomad policies in some Sahelian countries and the association of the nomadic lifestyle with insurgency and crime, people are opting out of this itinerant lifestyle and the close encounter it requires with the desert. More and more Tuareg people are choosing subsistence agriculture and animal husbandry over migration and trade. More and more people are educated in French and Arabic, becoming less fluent in the language of mountain ranges, sand dunes, wind currents, ancient wells, oases, and animal populations or migrations. Terms like desertification and its cloud of politically charged claims and counterclaims backed by scientific research of varying and sometimes dubious quality have more or less replaced the living witness of people whose existence depended on the ifs and whens and how much of the desert rains. The desert and its shifting boundaries endure, but will it remain at the center of the Tuareg people's existence? Will modernity and its demands loosen the centuries-old mutual hold the landform and the people have had on each other? The same question can be asked of the Sahrawi people of the northwestern corner of the Sahara. The Sahrawi are another nomadic people who trace their roots to admixtures of Arabic Bedouin, North African Amazigh, and various West African peoples. The term Sahrawi is eponymous. In Arabic, it translates to desert dweller, and it shares a root with the word Sahara. Sahrawi people are found in Mauritania and Western Sahara. Many of them, however, currently live in refugee camps based in Algeria and Morocco, and this unfortunate situation arises from violent conflicts between the government of Morocco that claimed Western Sahara as part of his territory, and the Polisario Front, which is a Sahrawi nationalist movement. Due to colonial ties, there are also Sahrawi enclaves in Spain and Cuba. Historically, and despite, maybe even because of their refugee and exiled status, the Sahrawi claim the desert, or the Badia as they call it, fiercely. And this is evident in their poetry, an art form which Sahrawi poet Mohamed Jaga claims is greater than speech itself. In the Sahrawi poetic tradition, the desert is space and place in all the multidimensionality that these words imply. It is a textured landscape both physically and in how it is embroidered by historic, literary, and human dimensions. It is indifferent, sterile, harsh. It is welcoming, nurturing, bountiful. It is intimately known and yet mysterious. It is mutanafa, liberation, a space to breathe far from the confines of urban life. Yet, it is a space bounded by culture and tradition, where young Sahrawi people go to learn the ways of their forebears. It is father, it is mother, it is a beautiful bride. It is hell, it is heaven, it is home. But enough commentary, let's hear from the poets themselves, and we'll go straight to the greatest of them all, Mohammed Mustafa Mohammed Salem, or Badi. Badi is one of the most celebrated Sahrawi poets. His poem, Tishuash, roughly translates to nostalgia. The sense of the words in the poem focus on the pleasure of remembering things that are past. Badi passed away in 2019 at the age of 83, and he spent the last half of his life in an Algerian refugee camp where his poems, written in the Hassaniya dialect of Arabic, gained much renown. In Tishuash, Badi reflects on the fading nomadic lifestyle of the Sahrawi. And in less than 300 English words, he expresses that peculiar combination of elation and grief that comprises nostalgia. At the heart of it all is the Sahara Desert and all it offers and takes in return. Tishuash. All that has been gone, how great the living and everlasting God, but how beautiful this scene is. I see it sometimes, no particular place, just there with the goats, like those nights I spent at the mouth of a well, making the wet sand my bed, enchanted by the night's music, the howl of wild dogs and the insects' whine. Or in the watering season, when the wheat is still to produce its seed. I am there in the midst of the camp. I am there in the midst of the life of the camp, doing some little thing about which you do not need to ask. Or there we are traveling in the dark before dawn, from one stopping place to the next. They only sound the swishing of camels' tails before the sun has risen to our eye line, walking on to those first lucid hours of the day when the desert's features are clearest, knowing both rocky valley and the smooth. And there again is the taste of tea, flavored with dye, in water sourced from the valley floor after the rains, or scooped from pools on concave rocks where a river had run before. When we were moving our camp from a dried up well, where only the firewood left was no better than kindling. And I can smell that animal hide next to the spit and see the clean bones beside that hide. How come, my brother, you do not remember this, the sweet life full of living? It is no longer with us, and if Tishuash could bring it back, it would add Tishuash to the Tishuash of my Tishuash. Throughout this year-long focus on the folklore of African landscapes, I have often found myself wondering what difference it can really make in this world of ever-arising and escalating human conflict. But it struck me today, however, that perhaps one way us Africans can repair and reaffirm the bonds that tie us together is by looking again at the landforms that connect us, the mountain ranges that spread from country to country, the rivers that thread their ways from homeland to homeland, the forests in whose depths generation upon generation have lived, the deserts whose winds and waters have chiseled countless lineages, the seas and the oceans that surround us, the hills, valleys, lakes, and plains whose siblings across the continent attest to the common stock from which we emerge. Maybe, just maybe, our future lies in our ability to look at them again and see more than land or resources. Maybe our future lies in remembering that they are a shared inheritance to be understood and stewarded. I'd like to thank you all for listening to MA this year, for reading, for sharing, and for giving feedback. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. And I'll see you in 2026.